I've mentioned something as part of this conversation, something touching on the index event. This is the traumatic event we experienced. And for some people, it's really important for them to have that diagnosis of PTSD or trauma-related disorder. And for them, that's important. That might give them context. That might give you context in terms of your day-to-day life. What we want to focus on here is impairment. How's it affecting you? You may have experienced, for example, a really tough relationship. Let's say with a friend. It's really on and off. It's all over the place. You can't quite make sense of it. And that may not necessarily meet criteria for PTSD. It's not going to hit index event. We don't care about that because that might say, hey, you still might need some attention. You still might need to work through this relationship, process it, make sense of it. It may have impacted you. That can still fall under this discussion because we're saying it might have affected your belief system. It might be something that you view as incredibly impactful. While that may not be appropriate for a structured 12-session treatment, that doesn't mean that's something that can't bring you in to discuss. That doesn't mean that's something that you can't come and talk about and process with another person. As we're talking, you might have some thoughts popping in your mind. You might be processing the information and thinking about what others in your life have told you about your experiences. Maybe you've been given some messages. Some people are concerned that their experience isn't valid, isn't bad enough, isn't important enough to focus on. And if it's affected you, if it's important to you, that means it's important enough to talk about. Now, what we want to do is understand how it's impacted you and also try to put those conversations, those messages from others in context. There's a really great example in our day-to-day lives that most of us experienced or we see frequently. If you think about when a kid falls down, young kids playing, maybe they're on their bike or they're running, and they fall and they scrape their knee, there's a really common response that we tend to see out of parents. We all know we want to give that kid that space, but parents tend to rush in. They tend to say, maybe it's an authority figure, and they say, you're okay, you're all right. And we're giving them messaging there. We're telling them how we think about what they experienced. We want to give them that moment to look at us, make sense of it in their own terms, ask us questions if they have questions. But you can see where that response comes from. It's well-intentioned. Those people want to help that kid. They want to help that child feel safe. But in the same breath, our intentions don't always have the effect we want. For those in your life people in your life that may have said, hey, you need to get over it, or you need to put it behind you, or just deal with it, it likely came from a good place. They were likely trying to be beneficial. But we know that if we're that easy, we would do it. When something affects us, we typically try to work through it. We try to make sense of it. Trauma is one of those events. A traumatic event is one that we tend to get stuck in. It's difficult to recover from for some people. We want to give that attention there and also understand how others may be viewing what we've experienced in our own lives. Something that can tend to happen as we talk about trauma. You're hearing that word a lot. You're hearing index event. You're hearing a lot of this jargon. And the goal of this is to make it, we want to simplify it. If we can make things sound simpler, if we can make them less complex, it's easier to view it and see it in our day-to-day life. There's a skill we can apply when we're feeling somewhat distressed. And that's what tends to come up as we talk about the symptoms of trauma, as we talk about these different experiences. Some people might feel that fight-flight system going off a little bit. They might feel a little less relaxed, less comfortable. Maybe there's some anxiety. And we can throw a really specific skill in here. Now, I do want to set this aside. This is not necessarily, this is not trauma treatment itself, but it's a coping skill we can use. And it's focusing on our breathing and trying to understand why our breathing happens the way it does. If we look at something like anxiety, it's a way that the mind can clue us in. It can tell us, hey, there's a threat. There's something you need to prepare for. The mind may not know exactly what it is, and it might be more broad. I know there could be a threat, but it tends to put us on edge. It's trying to motivate us for something that may happen. And that's beneficial, if we have a test the next day. Yeah, we want to feel a slight degree of anxiety so that we study, so we put that effort forth. We don't want that anxiety so high that it's impairing, that we open the book and we can't concentrate. We also don't want it so low that we take a nap. We want it in that sweet spot. And sometimes talking through some of these symptoms or even thinking about trauma can make us more anxious. We can focus on what we're doing, what our role is to manage that anxiety. We tend to hyperventilate or change the way we're approaching the moment in terms of our breath. As we look at something like, let's say, an athlete, a runner. A runner is someone that we're likely going to see them hyperventilating when they're performing, and that's going to be functional. That's going to get a lot of oxygen in their body. It's going to get them going. It's going to get them moving. That's very helpful. They'll breathe very quickly, very deeply. That type of breathing, it's not helpful when we're sitting at a desk. It's not helpful when we're doing homework. So one component that we can do, one skill we can put into effect is breathing retraining. And it's trying to focus on our breathing in terms of looking at maybe our shallow breathing and trying to make sure it's deeper, but to focus on the exhalation. As we breathe deeply, we take a lot of oxygen in, it's cluing the mind in that, there's something to be anxious about here, and it feeds that anxiety. And we can often look at situations in our lives where people may have said, hey, relax, take a deep breath. Again, a well-intentioned message, but it's not really the inhalation there that's beneficial. It's the exhalation. It's, they take that deep breath, they hold it in, and then they blow it out slowly. And that's what clues the mind in. That's what tells the mind, oh, it's okay to relax here. That's what tends to bring the anxiety in. And there's a really simple way to think about this. It's when we're in that moment that the anxiety is high, the breathing is fast. If someone says take a deep breath, it's not really that easy. So we're asking you to do something really specific. Count on the inhalation, count on the exhalation, and have a little hold in the middle. Have a pause. So, that in count might be 3, 4 for some people. We want that out count, the exhalation longer. 5, 6. And that hold in the middle is incredibly beneficial. That hold is what's telling the mind, oh, we don't need more oxygen here. We can slow down in this moment.